Welcome to the party. I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota. Training camp practices start today. We've also got major takeaways from yesterday's press conferences on today's Wednesday edition of the Minnesota Football Party.
Locked On Sports Minnesota podcast. It's endless Minnesota Vikings talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota Football Party. It's your guys hanging out talking next level Vikings football. So join in with Pro Football Network's Arif Hassan, Locked On Vikings Luke Braun, Superior Sports Talk's Luke Inman, and Vikings insider Sam Ekstrom, plus the biggest names in Minnesota football for the Minnesota Football Party. And it starts now.
It's a mailbag Wednesday. It's a Reggie Wilson Wednesday on the Minnesota Football Party. Welcome in. It's training camp week. Talking Vikings football on today's program with plenty of updates from the head coach, the GM, and the quarterback yesterday at TCO Performance Center. Locked On Sports Minnesota is accessible in so many ways. You can find us on YouTube for free. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, also on Amazon Fire, Roku, and the Sirius XM app. Thanks so much for tuning in today, folks. Reggie Wilson, KARE 11 sports director and anchor, joins us every Wednesday. He's with us today. He's at Reggie Wilson TV on Twitter. Reggie, extreme heat this week at training camp. I'm going to wear my tank tops, my short shorts, my flip flops. I'm going to have sunscreen like bleached all over my face, big sun hat. I'm ready. I've got all my wardrobe in order.
Yeah, heavy on the aloe vera this week for me with the shorts. Maybe not short shorts like yours. You know, you got your Birddogs that we still haven't gotten yet, but Luke and I digress. But yeah, it's gonna be hot out there, man. It's just so happens the 2 days that I have committed to being out there today and tomorrow just happen to be the hottest days of the week. So we'll be out there sweating it out, but I'm committed to wearing a dark shirt out there so that the pit stains aren't just too crazy. But looking forward to seeing what this year's Vikings look like.
Yeah, that's a veteran move right there, Reg. Just so you don't get the pit stains. This is not your first training camp, I can tell. Also, Sam, you got to watch out for that farmer's tan going on by about practice 10 or 11. That was a rookie mistake by myself back in the Mankato days, if you remember that.
I've got a good baseline from golf this summer, a good golf tan, so maybe that'll save me a little bit of suffering on the front end. That was the voice of Luke Inman, by the way. He's at Luke_Spinman on Twitter, the sidekick here on the Minnesota Football Party. We've got training camp depth chart questions from fans, extension talks to get to, and Harrison Smith's bizarre food choice. We'll get to that at the end of the show. But let's kick it off with this and Reggie Wilson. Big press conferences yesterday, very high-level updates from the coach, the quarterback, and the GM. Any big headlines that stuck out to you?
Yeah, I think I got a couple. So the first one, so it's so funny when I was talking to friends, they were like, man, Kevin O'Connell just seems like a really high-energy, confident guy, his insight on quarterback is just incredible. And I'm like, we kind of get a little bit more from that show than we usually kind of get in press conferences with him because he keeps it really vanilla. I mean, he definitely is not like a short guy in what he says. And I think it's strategic because, he wants to make us understand that he cares about what we're asking him, but at the same time, he's just not very. He doesn't give us a whole lot. He and Kwesi both are just masters at saying a lot, but not saying much at all. And I respect it. It is what it is. It kind of makes it kind of hard for us to do our jobs when we're just trying to pick out something that could work. Yesterday, it was interesting the comments that they said about Danielle and just trying to pick those things out. But one of the biggest things that I thought was very interesting was just how verbose and actually pointed he was about Jordan Addison and about him being disappointed in his actions. And he was just like, look, the why, I understand the why. The why is important, but the what kind of supersedes the why in this moment. And you just can't put yourself in the position where you're driving that fast. And I told him I was disappointed, and like how he was talking to us about it was as transparent, I think, as he has been with us about anything. And that was very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. And what I like, and I've been having a lot of different conversations about like accountability lately, just like in life. And I love a person who can hold another person accountable, like Kevin O'Connell did Jordan Addison. It's like, look, the stuff came out about the dog, and you know, the emergency at his residence about the dog, and you know, that may have been, you know, a thing for sure. But he was just like, yeah, even if that was a thing, like that still doesn't justify what he did. Like you can't be doing that. You can't put yourself in that situation because it could have been a lot worse. And I think, you know, regardless of the discourse that has been since Jordan Addison's incident, everybody has had their opinions. I think the one that matters most is what his team thinks and what his head coach thinks. And his head coach pretty much like put his stake in, like put his line in the sand, like this is how I feel about this. And it was just interesting that that's what he gave us about it. I really thought that was a pretty strong takeaway. And then also just what he said about Danielle. Like I think Danielle kind of showing up was kind of like a stunner for all of us. I think that was something that we expected to be like, okay, like it's day one of training camp and there's no Danielle. When will he be here? And it was so interesting because it almost kind of seemed like Kwesi was a little chapped yesterday. Like, you know how a person smiles, you know, like the question like, hey, like, you know, what's up? And he's just like, hey, you know, I'm happy he's here. You know, it was
non-answer.
Yeah, he's like, if they expect him to be a part of the team or, you know, practicing or whatever, he's like, I'm happy to see him. It's always good to see a great football player like that. And like that little smile, you're like, oh, like it's something behind
it. Through the smile,
passive aggressive smile. Yeah. Hey, think about maybe a Dalvin Cook returning someday. You know, great guy. Love the guy to death. Always will. Always have. But you know, I just want to focus on the guys we have here today, right in front of us.
Yeah, okay? It was real. You were like, oh, like what are you saying that you're not saying? I think that was really interesting to me too. He didn't seem the most thrilled to be having that conversation with the assembled media. It just seemed like, I don't know, but I don't know why they wouldn't think that we would ask about that. And I understand, like Danielle's set to make $5.5 million this year, which is far below, like freaking Nick Bosa is sitting out, or he's holding out right now, and he's due, I think, like $17 million this year on that fifth-year option bonus. And like that is quite the chunk of change. And he's holding out for a new deal. So like I can only imagine how Danielle feels. He's like, look, I had a productive year last year. I was healthy. I made the Pro Bowl again. So like, of course he wants to do a new deal. But it's just interesting hearing what both Kwesi and KOC said. You know, they both were like, hey, it's just good to get him in the building. We haven't seen him all year. First time we've seen him since the season ended. So those were my couple takeaways.
Yeah, I mean, Reggie touched on a lot of the good stuff. We kind of talked before the show, a lot of broad overview stuff for sure. I think now that practice actually starts, they put the pads on today, we'll start to get into a little bit more football and X's and O's as the week goes on. But I thought it was really interesting when Kwesi brought up that competitive rebuild once again. How many times in the last 12 months have we all asked, what does the competitive rebuild actually mean? What's the definition. I think he finally shed some light and gave us an actual definition where a lot of teams, let's just use the Bears and Ryan Poles, for example, when building a team, they're going to break everything down to the studs and build it up from scratch. And what you do is once you finally do make the playoffs, you give yourself a little 2-3 year Super Bowl window, they like to call it, but you got a real shot to do it. The competitive rebuild, they want to try to make the playoffs every year. They want to get in the dance every year. And once we're in the playoffs, who knows? Let's just roll the dice and see what happens. Anything can happen. And there's a couple different ways to do it. He mentioned going the veteran route, which we saw last year. That worked out. You bank on the veterans, right? That core group of guys, and you bank on them being healthy, which is exactly what happened last year. Proof was in the pudding. They went 13-4. This year, it's going to be more about the young guys and banking on that high upside stuff. Obviously, a lot of different variables to both equations, but it was interesting to finally hear what this competitive rebuild means to him anyways through his lens on paper. And that means having a team in a roster that can just get to the playoffs. And from there, anything can happen. Obviously, pros and cons to both. I don't think one's right or one's wrong, whether you want to go the Bears route or what Kwesi and KOC are doing here in Minnesota. But it was interesting to finally get some clarity about that competitive rebuild once and for all.
Yeah, a couple things for me. Number one, I think there is a serious domino effect that has to happen with all of these negotiations. Right now, the Vikings are juggling Danielle Hunter contract, TJ Hockenson contract, and Justin Jefferson contract. And the way that Kwesi talked about TJ Hockenson and Justin Jefferson made you feel pretty good that talks are in the works and something's going to get done. It just said like he just answered them differently than anything about Danielle Hunter, where he was doing the grimace smile thing. He dodged a little bit. And I think that negotiation probably has to be the first domino, right? Because that's money that is coming on the books this year, maybe a big chunk of money. And they've got money. They don't have a lot of money. They've got $18 million on the cap, right? So it's not like they can just give Danielle a blank check. That's not how it works. So that those negotiations are touchy and probably influencing whatever's going to happen with Jefferson and Hockenson. I would guess, just based on signing bonuses, that at least some money with the TJ Hockenson extension would have to get introduced this year. Maybe I'm wrong about that, or maybe not. Maybe they can kick it down the road. But the Danielle Hunter contract is possibly holding up, I think, the chain of events that has to happen for all of this to work. Number two. No one's mentioned this. How about Kirk hiring a body guy full-time? Going straight Tom Brady, Alex Guerrero on the bit. Going to have a guy that literally works for him full-time, moved him in from Atlanta to try to extend his career. Ron Johnson was saying this morning on the show, great investment. Hire a guy for $100,000. If he extends your career by 1 year, you make $40 million. That is 40 times your investment. Did I get that right? It's a lot of money. It's a great investment. So Kirk, he's really buying into this bodywork thing, and I think it's working for him thus far, to be honest with you guys. So that was a big takeaway for me. And we got a lot of Twitter questions to get to as well, folks. So we'll circle back to that right after I tell folks that we're brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's an official sportsbook partner of Locked On. You can make every moment more at FanDuel by betting NFL futures. You can bet the golf tournament this week, the 3M Open. You can also bet baseball. The Minnesota Twins favored against the Mariners in a matinee this afternoon. New customers who are betting get 10 times their initial bet back in bonus bets, up to $200. So you bet 20, get 200. Bet 10, get 100. And that's free money going to you in bonus bets, whether you win or lose. It's all on the safe, secure, easy-to-use FanDuel Sportsbook app, or go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to play at America's #1 sportsbook. Get up to $200 back in bonus bets. Why not? FanDuel.com/lockedon. It's FanDuel, an official partner of Major League Baseball.
That's 400 times the investment.
400 times the investment. Add a zero to that.
Yeah.
Good math, Reggie. Thank you.
Yeah, I used the calculator.
Appreciate that. Yeah. Couldn't do that in my head right away. So we've got some good Twitter questions coming in related to training camp. We're going to roll through these, and then we're going to end on a bizarre Harrison Smith food choice. Dustin Roberts, what's a hard date to start the panic if Hunter isn't signed by? So I'm looking at the calendar, Reg, July 26th today. When do we hit the panic button?
First off, just wanted to say happy birthday to my mom. It's July 26th today.
Hey.
That's her birthday. So July 26th today. Maybe September 1st. September 1st. How about that?
So you're willing to be patient.
That?
You're not sweating. You're letting this thing play out. Maybe Danielle just doesn't want to do training camp.
Well,
maybe he just wants to Brett Favre the bit.
So I am not like sweating, but in that scenario that you just gave, that would kind of sweat it out with TJ and JJ and as far as their extension. Right. So I'm sure they don't want to wait until then to do anything. But Kwesi kind of made it sound like nothing was necessarily imminent with those guys either. So I don't know. I don't know what to believe, man. They say all those words, and what do those words mean? Do they mean anything?
Yeah, it's a kind of a big nothing burger sometimes when he says that dialogue is ongoing. That's the stock answer. So September 1st from Reggie. Luke, what do you think?
I just think the fact that he voluntarily showed up without a deal after all this commotion, all the drama, such a great sign for things to come. And I think a deal gets done here relatively soon. The important thing, you got to take advantage and capitalize on the momentum that he did show up before this kind of momentum loses its luster again. I think that's going to be the key here. That's going to be super important. And we brought this up 100 times now, but under the Spielman regime, you'd always see deals get done with guys like Harry, Linval, Rudy, etc. about a week into camp, maybe a few days less. I think if you wait any longer than that, doubt can start to creep in now, and then you're losing that momentum. Maybe practice 7 or 8. I'll say practice 8. I think I'll give them a week window here to miss practice. Practice 8, whatever day that falls on. That's when I'd start to look around and wonder, okay, what's taking so long here? They got to get a deal done soon.
Yeah. When's the first preseason game? Is it the 12th, the 11th? I would say that day, that the first preseason game would be my panic day. Here's another problem, guys. They are already stuck for $28 million dead with Kirk. And then Danielle already has 11.24 dead next year.
Yeah.
Right? It's not as if they can just tack on a big number in void years. They've already done that with Danielle's contract. So that's problematic, I think, in these negotiations. I think that what you need to do is really, ideally, eliminate some of that dead money next year, give him a fair, hefty 2-year deal with a little lower number this year. You fit in the cap this year. Number might escalate next year, but you do have the money to handle it. Or maybe you extend the void years beyond next year and just kick that down the road. I think a beefed up 2-year deal is probably the ideal solution with Danielle. And I'm saying August 11.
So kind of like what they did with Kirk then, doing the 2-year deal.
Yeah. Give him an extra year beyond this year. And if you have to add void years, I don't love it. Do it. Because again,
money's starting to add up, Sam.
I know. Well, I'm trying to solve one problem and creating another, because the dead money next year is already a problem. So if you get him to play for you next year, then at least you get the player, right?
That dead, once it's dead on the cap, on the books, it's set in stone, correct?
No. If you sign the player, then that money
obviously, yeah.
It's right. Gets lumped in. Yeah. So you can clear, but so you'd have to trade him, I believe, or clear or sign him. Otherwise, that money is stuck.
They got a lot of money to play with right now, just sitting there, over 18 mil to play with. So I'm with you. Maybe front load a deal, soak up some dead cap, because you're right. On top of the 28 dead with Kirk, boy, you're really behind the 8 ball from a front office lens going into the offseason next year, being down 30, 40 million for guys that potentially won't even be playing it down for you. So I'm with you. Yeah, soak up as much of that dead money as you can and front load a deal and make him happy now. 18 million and change to play with right now, just sitting there. Use some of that to make Danielle happy and stay here long term as well.
But do you think Kwesi is just like cursing Rick Spielman at this point? He's just like, you bleep, 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 sticking me with all this bleep, 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 bleep. Like, I think that's been the toughest part about this. We don't necessarily know. Like, we've kind of gotten a little bit of a pullback into the lens of like who Kwesi is and what he's about. But I think that's been the toughest part about this whole thing. We don't really know much about Kwesi's dealings. Like, he hasn't really given a big money extension or big money contract to anybody yet. So we don't know like what his tendency is as far as like, okay, will he do something into training camp? Will he, wait until camp and preseason is over? Will he do something during the season? Like, we don't really know any of his tendencies because he hasn't given out any big money to anybody yet.
Correct. Yes. And that is a little unsettling, not knowing how this guy operates.
August 10th, by the way, Sam, first game, preseason Seattle game. So 15 days from now.
Yeah. I feel like 2 weeks. That's a good amount of time to have negotiations, I think. Question from Lucky Dragon 84. That's a good number. Has two of them. Asked about the latest on the potential new deals. I think we addressed that pretty well. Ongoing talks. I think Hunter might be the first domino. And then initial training camp depth chart. Again, we're going to have a lot of that today. First practice today. I'll be tweeting at Sam Ekstrom. The Vikings don't release their official depth chart until early to mid-August. So that'll be the official depth chart, but we'll have the leaks for you coming out of practice. That'll start today when the Vikings are on the field, and we'll see if there's any shakeup from minicamp, right? Like, were there any changes made? Because it's been, at safety, for instance, it's been Metellus the third, seeing the fourth guy. Will that have changed at all? Will the cornerback pecking order have changed at all? We saw a lot of a Caleb Evans out there. Andrew Booth seemed to be maybe like a little step behind. Is he going to be elevated in the order? So stuff like that. We'll see if they made any changes from the spring practices to the summer practices. So that's the answer there. From Curtis Nelson, with the rash of offensive tackle extensions announced this morning, what are the odds both Darrisaw and Kirk are back next season? So he's referencing, I saw for sure Andrew Thomas, the Giants tackle. He signed for an average annual value of like $23.5 million per year. Good tackles, guys, are now, it's like good edge rushers, $23 million per year now if you're the best in the market. And guys, I hate to say it, Christian Darrisaw might set the market. He's that good when he re-signs. Good news is, Luke, I don't think they have to sign this deal next offseason. That's year 3 for him. He has a 5th-year option. I think they can wait to sign Darrisaw until 2 years down the road and not have to worry about that. So Darrisaw and Kirk coexisting, I don't think that's really the issue right now.
He's going to be here a long time. He's a fixture. He's a core nucleus player in this Vikings roster long-term. You scouted him, you drafted him, you developed him into what he is now, a rising superstar. That whole process doesn't happen often in this league at such a premium position, no less. So I think Christian Darrisaw will always be a part of the long-term plans. The bigger question here is Kirk Cousins, obviously. And I think it all depends on what happens this season. Can he carry this team into the playoffs and win a few games this time? I think it's going to be a really difficult decision to extend him again and keep running it back. We just talked about kicking the can down the road. You're already going to pay him eventually at some point. Got to pull the plug. A lot of dead money did not even play for you, especially given to what Kwesi mentioned about how much this front office values finding a way to get into the dance, see what happens every year. Kirk Cousins, he always gives you that high floor. I mean, that's such a huge advantage if that's what your competitive rebuild philosophy is, to win 8, 9, 10 games every year. That's Kirk Cousins in a nutshell. I think the better question here is, what are the odds of having both Kirk Cousins and KJ Osborne back next year? Because if you bring back Kirk Cousins on another $35, $38 million deal, someone's going to have to go. You're going to have to trim somewhere at some place in the roster. So I wonder if that would be a guy like KJ Osborne, who's likely going to command a healthy payday next year in free agency.
Yeah, I agree with you, Luke. I'd say it's already slim, even without Kirk, that KJ comes back, because they have Addison. If Addison shows that he's legit, that makes that decision very easy.
And keep a close eye on Jalen Nailor too, and his progression and development, just how confident and comfortable they are, giving him a larger role even next year in 2024 as well.
Yeah, Reggie, I just can't begin to wrap my head around another big money extension when we already have to deal with Hunter, Hockenson, Jefferson, Kirk. Just give it to me 4 at a time. I can't handle a 5th guy.
Yeah, I think, look, Darrisaw is going to get paid. If he continues his extension, Darrisaw Island comes back again for another season of dominance. Look, say what you want about Rick Spielman, but he hit some gold on some of these draft picks, okay? And Darrisaw is another one that really, shout out to the scouting department. Shout out to everybody who's doing their homework on these guys, the Luke Spinmans of the world. I think they're doing a great job with that particular part. We don't, I think it's yet to be seen what some of Kwesi's draft picks will be, but some of the guys that he inherited, like how blessed are the Vikings to have O'Neal on one side and then Darrisaw on the other? And how cool is it that he's only going into year 3? Because like you said, Sam, like if they choose not to keep riding with Kirk Cousins and that dead money is on the cap next year, may not want to, try to do some type of an extension, especially like when it comes to pecking order. Justin Jefferson is number 1. Then you got TJ, and maybe Jefferson is 1B if you put Hunter at 1A. I don't know. But, something has to be done about that. But with the extensions, if Kirk comes out and balls this year, especially considering what Luke was talking about, the whole competitive rebuild thing, I don't know that the Vikings are going to be in position to swing for one of the top guys in the draft because of that whole mindset that Luke just talked about with the competitive rebuild. And so honestly, I don't know. Stranger things have happened, but I don't know if there's a world where Kirk Cousins is not the quarterback next season. Especially if he's coming out getting his Guerrero guy and getting the body right, and if he goes out and balls out this year and another year in this system and shows above average competency in the system and throws for 4,000 yards, 30 plus touchdowns, keeps the interceptions down. They get to the playoffs and all that. Is just like, who are you going to get to replace that? Where you have these pass catchers like Jefferson, Hockenson, Addison, the ascension of a Jalen Nailor, like all these guys in their prime, if you will. Like you need a guy who's going to be able to get them the ball consistently and find success on offense. Kirk has shown the ability to do that. So, I know fans probably cringe at thinking about another big time contract for Kirk Cousins, but I mean, that's kind of the going rate for quarterbacks these days. So you kind of have to just deal with that. But, Darrisaw, like when it comes to extension ladder, like he's like kind of at the bottom of that. Like he still just needs to, just keep his head down, go to work, and it'll come for him.
2025 just seems like an eternity from now, and that's when you really have to make that decision. And in 2025, the Vikings have like $100 million in cap space. So I think we can put our minds at ease. The Vikings will be able to afford him. Who the quarterback is at that time, I don't know. I'm just amazed at how comfortable Kwesi is in the uncertainty. Being a new GM 2 years into this thing, to be comfortable in this spot, to not feel like you need to have a concrete plan at the most important position, it either speaks to his naivety or he's just playing 4D chess with us. And maybe he's just really good at saying things in front of the media without offending his players. But the way he talks, he makes it sound like the door is open in the dialogue with Kirk's people. But then Kirk gets up there and kind of a little backhanded, comment there saying, well, I tell my agent only to call me if there's something worth talking about. And basically he hasn't called me. So those talks can't be too far down the road. So again, we're just going to have to wait.
Reggie mentioned, hey, quick props to Rick Spielman finding this guy. People forget We were drafting 14. He actually traded down 9 spots and still ended up with Christian Darrisaw with the Jets and added a bunch of more day 3 picks. Ended up getting guys like Kene Nwangwu, Cam Bynum, and some other guys too. So yeah, it wasn't all bad under Rick Spielman. Let's not forget about that.
We're talking secondary battles and Harrison Smith's weird snack. After I remind folks that we're partnered with the Sirius XM app, the Twins take on the Seattle Mariners again today at 12:10 p.m. matinee. Catch the hometown broadcast. Corey Provis on the call on the SXM app. Just search Twins, and you can find Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube. Subscribe for free, and you can get all of the press conferences from training camp. I'm taking the video personally. I'm posting it personally, so I can vouch they will be there. Yesterday we had KOC, we had Kirk posted on that channel, so check that out. A lot of juicy stuff coming out of those press conferences. Secondary battles. Fred wants to know what they're looking like. So we don't really know for sure yet, but let's project. Within the secondary, what battles are you guys most focused on? Reg?
Andrew Booth Jr. What's up, baby? What's up? What's up? It's time. It's time. I think it's interesting because what we heard earlier this offseason from Kwesi is he's like, look, man, we drafted these guys last year for a reason. We believe in all these guys. And so I think when it comes to the secondary, Lewis Cine taken at the end of round 1, Andrew Booth Jr. taken in round 2, like those are 2 dudes that I think Kwesi is like, all right, come on. We got to see it. We got to see it from these guys. I think, his draft crush, he wants to see a Caleb Evans take the next step forward as well. And so, but I'm looking at Andrew Booth Jr. A lot of fanfare on him coming here. He slipped out of the first round. A lot of people had him graded as a first-round talent and just basically was a wash last year. Had some training camp battles last year, a little aggressive and, a little handsy. Missed pretty much all of his rookie season. It's about the young guys now. It's Byron Murphy and the Pips, basically. Like, Byron Murphy's Gladys Knight. And, like, even he's just not the strongest Gladys Knight just because of all the time he missed last season. So he's expected to anchor, the cornerback unit. But, like, it's a unit built of largely unproven guys. And, I believe that these guys have supreme amount of talent, but it's time to show up and prove what we got. Like, you just hope that the injuries are a thing of the past, or at least a thing of the past enough that, Booth doesn't miss significant time with them. But I think it's time. It's time for him to show up and show everybody what he's about. He's a very confident guy. I think it's time to match that.
Yeah, Reg brought up a great point, though. We kind of gloss over Byron Murphy a little bit too much. Like, all right, we got Murphy, and then what's the battle after him? If Byron Murphy were to ever go down and miss 3, 4, 5 games, boy, that would shake things up. I'm just interested to see Brian Flores deploy these sub packages and where he's got these guys in the pecking order. So when he goes to the nickel, okay, Byron Murphy's sliding inside to that nickel cornerback role. Who's the 2 boundary cornerbacks? Is that a Caleb Evans and Mekhi Blackman? Is it Andrew Booth? Is it a veteran right away in camp like Joanne Williams from the Patriots? And then the safety battle as well. Guys, Josh Metellus is not going anywhere. Harrison Smith got up to the podium, spoke volumes about just how much of a student this guy is of the game. He's a coach. He's actually taught Harrison Smith some stuff about the playbook and film and things like that. That speaks volumes to me. I don't know where Lewis Cine fits in all this, but I got to imagine whether it's Brian Flores, the head coach KOC, or the guy who drafted him, they're finding ways to get him out on the field, whether it's just one sub-package look or whatever it may be. They're going to do everything they can to get this guy some real live football reps now that he's entering year 2, because that's the only real way I think he's going to start to develop and get better. Where and how that looks, guys, I have no idea. But again, keep a close watch on Brian Flores and all those sub-package looks.
So Harrison Smith is literally 9 years older than the next oldest member of the secondary. Josh Metellus, 25. Lewis Cine, 23. Cam Bynum, 23. Jay Ward, 23. At cornerback, Byron Murphy, 25. Juwan Williams, 25. Caleb Evans, 24. Andrew Booth, 22. Mekhi Blackman, 24. You got youth, and if you can't find a couple players to rise up and entrench themselves as starters, then you got a problem. But you got no shortage of upside in that group. One thing you guys didn't mention, Jay Ward. What is he going to play? Is he going to be sort of in the Metellus role, almost as a hybrid? He's listed as a safety. Is he going to play some nickel, box? I think he needs to add a lot of weight. I think this is going to be a redshirt year for him. He seemed awfully small to me during minicamp, so I think this is going to be a strengthening year, a learning year. But I want to see where they play him, because I think that could be a future piece with Metellus being a free agent next year. Who knows about Harrison Smith? Obviously, you got to have future plans as well. So that's what we're looking at in the secondary. And speaking of Harrison Smith, Kirk Cousins threw him under the bus yesterday. It was Harrison Smith. Was it Kirk or was it Harrison? I think it was Kirk. Kirk threw him under the bus and said that he literally, as a part of his diet, melts cheese on a plate and eats it. And someone reached out to Harrison Smith on Twitter and said, "Is this true?" And Harry goes, "Shredded or block, typically cheddar, hot sauce optional." What do we make of this? Did we have Harrison Smith pegged all wrong? Is he actually a crazy person, Luke?
Genes are crazy, man. The fact that guy shows up to training camp every August, just absolutely shredded, just a brick house. One of the most
pun
feared.
intended.
Well, yeah, right. One of the most feared defensemen in the NFL. And then you find out, okay, what's your diet looking like again? Oh, I just throw some cheese. Yeah, I mean, sure, I have my preferences, right? I got my depth chart, but any cheese will do, really. Nuke it for 30 seconds, hot sauce optional. It's like, that's what you've been eating, man? Holy smokes, man. Yeah, pretty hilarious, if I'm being totally honest. I got to have a little bit of crunch in there, hence the nachos or some tortilla chips. But hey, Harry, whatever you're doing clearly is working, and it's been working for a long time, so you keep doing you.
Yeah, like when I melt cheese on tortilla chips, right, it is delicious at first because the cheese is still soft, but if you let that sit there for 10 minutes, that cheese hardens up, and that's not going to be good. It's going to be kind of chewy. You're going to have to gnaw it away. So I think you got to, if you're going to eat that stuff, you got to do it within like 5 minutes. Reggie, what kind of behavior are we looking at here?
Real sicko behavior, but you know what? It checks. You know, Harry's a different dude, man. He's a different dude, and I think he like leans into it as well, which is, you know, that's kind of cool. It's just like, you know what, live your truth, bro. You know, like, do you. But yeah, you know, my wife loves cheese, and you know, that would probably, she wouldn't put the hot sauce on it, but I could see her enjoying that. Actually, I don't think it's her first choice to do, but it just kind of reminds me of like when her and I were doing keto. She would make these tacos, and the tacos, instead of having like a shell, she would put some cheese on some parchment paper, put it in the oven, let it melt, and then let it harden up. And those were our taco shells.
Wow.
And so it kind of reminds me of that. But just like being like, you know what? I want a snack. Yeah, let me throw this cheese. Block cheese, the whole block cheese comment. Now that's some sicko stuff. Like I don't know about that one. Like the block cheese you putting in the microwave, and
how long are you microwaving that?
Yeah, and then how are you know, you just like take your hand and just like it just seems like real sicko behavior. But you know what? Harrison is a savage. It's on the field, and now we see it extends off the field as well.
Yeah, that's just a large amount of dairy. That's a lot of cheese. I love that Harrison has tweeted twice in the calendar year. He chose yesterday to his second tweet of the year was to tweet about his cheese melting.
He's got to put it out there. He's like, look, if you're gonna report on me, report right. Get the story right. Put some hot sauce on that thing, and that's how we doing it.
He settled it. Yeah, that was awesome.
I will say, in my entire media career, I've gotten one reply from Harrison Smith on Twitter, and that was the afternoon that Anthony Barr decided to pull a 180 on the Jets and come back to the Vikings. And I posted the Wolf on Wall Street, I'm not leaving clip. And Harrison Smith commented, I'm Donnie right now. Donnie, if you've seen the movie, you know his reaction is pretty priceless in that scene. So, yeah, he does not tweet very often or hit up social media. So to see him reply to this speaks volumes of how important this is to him.
Good talks today, fellas. Reggie, we're going to be out there braving the heat today. I'm still waiting for the notification that says they're moving it inside. I'm waiting for it. I'm anxious for it.
Yeah,
we still got time.
Keep waiting, brother.
Let's go. 97 today. Looking forward to it, though. We'll be out at camp. We'll have more coverage for you tomorrow on the football party. Arif Hassan, Luke Braun, as well as Friday on the roundtable where Reggie Wilson and Ron Johnson rejoin us. He's Luke Inman. I'm Sam Ekstrom. Thanks for following along. Subscribe, comment, follow us on Twitter, and keep on watching Locked On Sports Minnesota. Have a good one, people.
Water, Gatorade, so necessary today. Be blessed, spread love. Happy birthday again, Mama.